And so today, we're going to talk about something that is really in crisis, that most of us probably don't realize how severe the crisis is. The Global Alliance for the Future of Food says that the future of food is at stake. We are facing a breakdown of critical systems on multiple fronts: the pandemic, climate change, rising hunger. Each of these challenges is tied to a fragile food system that degrades the environment and undermines public health. It doesn't have to be this way. Food systems transformation can provide brilliant pathways to a better future, and all of us in this room can and should start to contribute to this future. We welcome our panelists, Jodi, Meg, Chris. Let's talk a little bit about yourselves. Jodi, please start off.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jodi Genshaft. My voice carries, so if it's shouting, I'll just stop. I am the Vice President of Marketing for Gotham Greens. We are a pioneer in indoor farming and also a fresh food brand. We have 3 greenhouses here in New York City, but we also now have greenhouses from coast to coast, everywhere into Colorado and Chicago and even in California. And we've been around for a decade. Our founders had a vision of decentralizing the food supply. I don't know how many of you know this fun fact, but 98% of your lettuce comes from California and Arizona. So if you live anywhere much further from those states, your greens have been on a truck and in a warehouse for over a week before you even get them to your grocery stores and your restaurants and your hotels. So we grow fresh produce close to where people live in cities across America, and really excited to share more about our story and our point of view with you today.
Thanks, Jodi. Meg?
Hi. Hi, guys. I'm Meg Savage. I am co-founder and chief growth officer of Feed Forward, and we are a food impact agency. We specialize in projects and work for a positive and enduring change in our food system. So the way we do that is through consultancy, whether it is hospitality, big corporate, nonprofit, private sector, etc. We also represent a number of various technologies, especially in the food space, and we are bridges in the glue to making those technologies happen in real world, in real time, and being a catalyst to that growth. And we also are involved with a little bit of tech IP. I've been in the food space for 10 plus years, prior to which in my past life, global marketing at like Condé Nast, Hearst, etc. But I came into food when I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, and I very much had the privilege, and I'm aware of that, of going to all these different doctors and being educated about my food and the access to food, and I would see the cost of this great food, and I am extremely passionate about making food more accessible, educating people about the power of food when it comes to your health, and also making our system more sustainable so everyone doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be a luxury to actually nourish yourself. So that is where I work and I thrive.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Grace. I'm CEO at Foodprint Group. We are a zero-waste business serving food and hospitality. And what that means is that we have a program that is a roadmap of design and operations practices, best practices, to help our clients get to zero waste. And then we have technology, an app that is really a meter for our clients' waste, like you meter your water, you meter your waste. You can use our Trax tool for that, and it's also a carbon calculator, so you understand the impacts that the materials you're wasting are having on the planet. We work with hotel groups, restaurant groups, in corporate dining, and I have actually been in the food space in various ways for over 20 years. I was a food systems planner, so as I spend today talking about the impacts of waste, and particularly food waste, I'm also thinking about food sourcing and local food production and distribution and all the things that that I want you guys to be thinking about as you're getting that tomato from 2,000 miles away that maybe should come from a little closer to home that we're going to be talking about. So, Erik?
And so this brings up the question, why is the future of food such an important topic? Why is it the first topic that this conference is addressing? Many of us think about what's in front of us while we're eating, but do we think about where it has come from? How long did it take to get there? What is the cost to get it to our plate? What happens after we send whatever we don't eat into the landfills, and all those other consequences that are oriented around perhaps just a bite of that tomato? And so, Chris, maybe if you could just go into what your organization is doing to address why this topic is so important.
Sure. So we landed here because my co-founder partner, Laura Rosenshine, and I were both working as consultants in companies and seeing so much waste, and we came at it with a goal to tackle food waste, because 8% of our greenhouse gases come from food waste. 34% come from the overall impacts of the food system, but 8% is just from wasted food. Most of that waste is happening in consumer-facing places, about 27%, and then about 37% is coming from homes. So it's all the end where most of that waste is happening. Some's happening on farms, some's happening in distribution, but so much we can all do. So we got there and we realized we couldn't look at food in a vacuum. We had to look at plastic packaging and all the other things that made it harder to reduce food waste and do the right things with it. So we created this program, and we're working with really bleeding edge groups like...
Perhaps a hotel group
Yes.
that we won't use their name, but
Okay.
maybe we could share some of the things that you're doing.
Sure, so there's so many good things going on, but as an example, one of our hotel partners, they have operations mostly in North America, but are growing globally, are very known for sustainability, and they are working with us to manage all their waste from materials, rather, from when they come in the door. But some of the cool things they're doing is they're looking at small things like oyster shells that are going back into the New York Harbor through the Billion Oyster Project. So they're serving oysters and they're keeping those shells here instead of sending them to landfill. They're tracking their food waste every day to understand where they can make a difference. They're serving surplus food to their staff, as many of you do. They're donating food locally in the city. They are creating cool menu items like coffee martinis with coffee grounds. But they're looking at it holistically, and also from a people perspective, where we look at design, but then we look at behavior change and making sure that their teams really understand the impact that they can have at work and at home, and when they measure their waste. And the goal is to get them to zero waste, with the global definition being 90% or better, diversion from landfill or incineration. Some of our clients really want to get to 100. But they can see that meter and they can communicate back, this is the equivalent this month, our waste reduction reduced, it's like taking 10 cars off the road or planting X acres of forest, and employees understand that. So as we look at metrics for cost savings, which we track because reducing your waste saves you a lot of money.
Can you apply a perhaps...
Sure. We have, for example, one client that we were able to reduce buffet waste off a single buffet in a single venue by 500 pounds a day, which is shocking. But if you're serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it's very, very typical. And just understanding that studies have been done. World Resources Institute shows that for every dollar you spend on reducing food waste and loss, you can save $14. So just using that metric, you multiply 500, you start to just look at the changes. Each pound of food waste costs about $1. It's like $1.50. But if you compare salmon, say, to an apple peel, it's very different. You start reducing a pound of your protein items that are going to waste that have been prepared. It's way, way higher. So I think just starting to, they're looking at this piece, but I kind of want to leave people with particularly what we're dealing with right now with staff shortages and it's really difficult to hire people. One of the biggest outcomes is not cost savings, and yes, it is environmental impact being the goal, but it's that they're attracting and retaining people because it's an exciting thing to be part of, to work for a company that really cares.
Meg, can you talk a little bit about your platform and what you guys see as problems with food and how you're addressing
Yeah, of course. Do you want me to speak to the food insecurity work a little bit
Yeah,
first?
that would be great. Thank you.
So prior to starting Feed Forward, I was the executive director of a nonprofit here in New York called Rethink Food, which actually works with restaurants and hospitality groups and whatnot to actually have those people create meals for our food insecure communities. COVID brought a lot of issues to light, not only in our food system, but also how we feed and nourish our local communities, whether it is our lower income communities all the way up to our higher income communities. And one of the things that my founders and myself started when we started Feed Forward was data and tech needs to play a role here. If it existed even just 5 years ago, we would have been in a much better place when it came to nourishing our communities during COVID. So we have a beta of a tech that we've unleashed that matches food insecure individuals with nourishment from their own communities, be it a restaurant or a grocery store or perhaps even hospitality. We have been talking to some groups, and we're also looking to include other resources like prescription discounts, of access to affordable health care. But when I get back to the food piece, that's just one small part. I mean, that's going to save and help a lot of people through a lot of hard times. But, and I know we'll get into this in a little bit, but it's really just working on supply chain and balance of our whole system. And beyond just this platform we've created, some of the tech that we work with is blockchain-backed food supply and getting things traceable, more affordable. I mean, we've been able to get salmon into low-income communities like Brownsville, Brooklyn, where majority of the grocery stores don't even carry it because they know their consumers aren't going to pay for it to purchase
And
it.
Meg, maybe just talk about that for 1 second, the blockchain aspect
Yeah.
of what you're doing. For me, in a very simpleton manner, perhaps folks in the audience would appreciate that as well. What does that mean?
So think of your supply chain. I'll do an example of the salmon since I just gave it, but salmon is harvested from the ocean, and every single step of the way, blockchain allows for it to be concrete data and also to be, so if you know that that salmon's coming from ocean to your plate, every single step of the way is ironclad. So everything is completely traceable. I can give you some very startling facts on our seafood and where it is right now.
Can you give us one startling fact? Just
give one?
Just to shake up things
I
as
mean,
we're hitting that 11
the
o'clock?
last I heard, it was like over 70% of seafood that's served isn't actually the species that you think you're eating. Is not. Or is some very removed version of it.
There's something very fishy about that. I agree.
So, I mean, there are many people, and there are policies coming to place or working for that right now, but I mean, that's very alarming, and blockchain actually allows for that not to exist. So if you are sourcing through blockchain-backed food supply, you're not going to have that issue.
And so when you say you can get that salmon to a grocery store in Brownsville, what is that? Why is that really unique and interesting?
So not only is unique because you're getting the actual product that you think you're going to be buying, but the blockchain, but there are so many margins and costs that bulk up along the supply chain that don't necessarily need to be there. And also blockchain allows for a lot of those steps to be completely removed in and of itself. So you're not only getting a higher quality product, you're also getting a product that is more affordable because you're not getting those cost margins up. So we are actually getting a sustainable protein to these communities in need, or like at a more affordable price. And I mean, that's something that we're looking to replicate on a much larger scale, whether it be in hospitality and beyond, because we need to be helping each other, and all should have access to the same nourishing food and quality. Like, food is not a privilege, it is a right for everyone to be able to nourish yourselves, and it's up to us to fix our food system in order to give everyone that right.
Which, let's segue into the pandemic. Jodi, what happened from Gotham Green's perspective? The world sort of shut down in March of 2020, and you guys are a small part of the food supply chain. What was the impact to you from the pandemic? And what were you seeing as an impact to perhaps those folks who are growing thousands of tons of lettuce in Mexico or California?
Sure. So I think that
those who are really focused in the space, you would see images on TV of actually like lots of fields being bulldozed over because farmers simply couldn't find a place for the food. They also weren't able to harvest it in time, and very short shelf life for many different types of crops. And it's really sad at the same time as so many people were in need of fresh food and in need of food in general. Our business model was really built on this idea of decentralizing the supply chain. So having produce that is literally grown within a few miles of where you purchase it has a huge benefit in general. But what we noticed in the height of the pandemic is, well, certainly food service business disappeared overnight, as I think that did with most food companies for quite some time. But we saw orders from retailers really spike because, again, our products could be delivered same day, if not the next day or 2 days later, right? And it was going to be fresh produce grown. We were really fortunate, I would say. Obviously, there's so many businesses that did not fare as well. We were able to maintain our operations the entire time. We didn't have to lay off any employees, which felt really good that we were able to keep that work going as essential workers. And we, in fact, actually expanded our operations. So we opened new greenhouses. In those first few months, we opened in Baltimore to service the Mid-Atlantic. We opened in Colorado. We made really good headway, and just this past winter opened in California. So everything was on track, and we were very fortunate. But certainly we saw the dynamics shift, and then now everything has started to level out again.
So when you say level out, that's sort of interesting to me because during the pandemic, supply chains, we saw how fragile they were,
Absolutely.
right? And so especially supply chains oriented around where our food comes from. And so if things are leveling out, I guess I'll throw the question to Chris, are they leveling out in a better way? In the sense that, did we learn anything about the fragility of our food systems during the pandemic?
I would really love to say we learned a ton and so much has changed. I think that we were just scrambling to get back to where we were pre-pandemic, which was a mess. Keep in mind, so much produce grown was being turned over in farms long before the pandemic because it didn't meet US 1 requirements. It wasn't perfect to look at. It could have been highly nutritious and delicious. But so we just, there's so many things that are broken, and I think that, I think from my world, in climate, there are more eyes on it because it brought everybody during the pandemic was like, wow, climate change is massive. As opposed to being distracted, it just made people think about, really, this is only all going to get worse. But the day-to-day work in the food system, it just seemed that people were just trying to get back on track to where it was before. So I don't think our distribution has changed. I think it's opened the door for innovation, but that the old guard, a lot is staying the same. Blockchain is huge because the biggest problem in our food system is a lack of transparency in everything and what people are paid and where the food is traveling and what's happening. So I think there's a hope, but I do think, honestly, the climate pressure is going to drive a lot of the changes, particularly as young people are so aware. So what we are seeing our clients really trying to do things differently. We definitely think there's so much attention on food waste. Groups like ReFed and World Wildlife were already bringing attention pre-pandemic, but now it's everywhere. And when Drawdown made it the #1 intervention in terms of addressing climate change, when they revised their list, it's just like it's a spotlight. So so there are good things. I think there are lots of new companies popping up to try to address the issues. But I don't know, you guys, what do you think?
Let me just throw in, the climate change is critical, as we all know, but globalization and perhaps a war in Ukraine and perhaps that area of the Ukraine and Russia is one of the breadbasket areas of our world, meaning I think it's something like 70% of agricultural commodities come from 6 breadbasket areas around the world. And Russia-Ukraine is one of those breadbasket areas. And so sprinkle in climate change to our food system, sprinkle in a war in the Ukraine, and the impact that the havoc that's wreaking on other areas. I think there was just a big riot in Greece the other day because they weren't getting some of the product they need to plant for the upcoming season. Meg, is there other aspects of what's going on here that...
I mean, I think it just takes what we even learned during COVID, how it kind of flipped our food system, or it shed a lot of light on things for people. As it, like, everyone has been used to kind of what they've been taught about food and having access to what they want at any given time or place, be like lending a blind eye to how it really works behind the scenes.
You meaning like a $1 burger at McDonald's?
Exactly.
Okay.
Like, I think the red basket areas and whatnot is just shedding light, whether it be in our food system or anything. We were talking before the baby formula shortage and all of that, and even tampon shortage, and people just being aware of the actual goods that it takes to produce these products that we use on an everyday basis, and how I'm not saying that we need to localize all of our food system and our distributions. I think we need to elevate it to a very high degree, because I'm not trying to keep people from getting products from, whether it's Greece or whatnot, to help have like a well-rounded diet, whether it's health reasons or even just to have that type of experience. But when there are these global events that significantly impact like one specific region, then it shouldn't affect the entire world in terms of food and costs and inflation and whatnot. Like, yes, we are one connected world, but we do need to localize 1,000% more.
And so is there a solution that any of you three have heard in terms of China, for example, I was reading, has more or less contained all of their agricultural needs in case globalization doesn't work? Is that the solution? We all sort of take 2 steps backwards and we focus on just North America and agriculture for our region? Chris?
There's a huge part of me that wants to say, yes. Yes. No, but absolutely we need to further regionalize, right? We're not all going to grow everything in Brooklyn for those of us who live here. But we need to have really strong regional food systems. That we can't expect that we're going to get olives in New York, or we definitely need a global food system to make available all the cool things that we like. But we could have tremendously stronger regional food systems all over the world. And I think Gotham Greens is really interesting because people say, well, we just don't have the right soil or the right environment. And of course, we could have the right soil if we just actually nourished our soil. So that's a whole other thing. Everyone watch Kiss the Ground if you haven't already. But we do have really interesting new methods of growing that make producing a significant amount of food more viable. There are hotels that actually grow food hydroponically or have farms in their gardens. So I think, yes, we need to regionalize. But we also need to support a global food economy.
It's finding that right balance,
Yes.
right? And the local just doesn't exist as nearly as much as it should. And I mean, there's a lot of buying power in this room, and a lot of like when you travel, right? You go to experience the culture, experience the local foods and whatnot. So when you're going to a hotel, yeah, there's the things from home, like the common things that everyone kind of wants to see, like a nice bed and all of that. But it's up to you guys to really source locally, educate people within your hotels. It doesn't have to be grandiose, but the way experience is how people are educated and actually change the way that they practice how they eat and where they buy from and whatnot. And when we have hotel groups and restaurant groups, etc., like the big players in the food space actually purchasing locally and doing it right, then the margins will fall. And it's like almost like if you build it, they will come. So like you really have a lot of power here, and being able to create that experience for people will then actually change people's buying purchases on the local level too, or when they go back home. So there really is something there in hospitality. I mean, pressure's on, guys. No, I'm kidding.
it
To
is.
Remember I said it's a
really
cult,
shake
so you gotta just keep, this is the indoctrination period.
to really shake it up. I mean, that's the power that you guys have here, and I think that's one of the reasons you wanted this to be one of the first panels we speak about, is to really realize that power.
Well, and to ask the question of, does this decision that we're making, this purchasing decision in particular, what are the impacts? And if we are going to have some food waste inevitably. You guys are probably mostly preparing fabulous, delicious food in-house, so there will be scraps. Is it being composted in the region, going back into the food system where we can actually buy produce from the produce scraps that we have wasted? You know, there's simple questions to start getting, you know, well, how do I fit into this system?
Are there any organizations that the three of you know of that are doing a tremendous job at this balance with their business food systems, how they're treating food?
We have, I mean, and I think I'm comfortable mentioning, we work with SH Hotel, Group 1 Hotels, everybody knows them, and they're doing a ton, and it's so much a part of their DNA. But we work with a 5-location bakery called Bread's Bakery in New York City. They don't have massive budgets. They're achieving zero waste. They're composting their food scrap locally. They're engaging in the community. They're supporting local honey production on rooftops in Union Square. I mean, it's just, you don't have to be massive to make a huge difference.
Are there any countries that are really good at how they treat food?
I was going to say Netherlands.
Yeah, the Netherlands. They're also a major.
That's where all the
everything.
technology around
Yeah.
greenhouse farming originated.
Netherlands,
This
yeah.
is not new, right? It's just there's a boom because it's newer here in the United States, but this technology's been around for decades. And I think what's fascinating, I think, from your position too, is there's obviously a local story, which is wonderful. There's a huge sustainability story where we have partners coming to us saying, like, we have this mandate, so we want to work with partners who are also doing good things, and we're able to grow using a lot fewer natural resources. So we're using significantly less water, significantly less land. We don't have any soil, so we can grow in places that don't have arable land, and that's a huge value in the future too. So by
Is
partnering
it cost
with,
effective? Is it to the point where it can be done in mass?
I think that it's getting there. It's getting better and better. Energy costs are, I think, one of the biggest questions right now in this space. There's actually an op-ed in today's New York Times about how indoor farming is the future, potentially the future of food. We're not saying that it's the future of food for every single crop, but for a lot of crops, we really think that this is the future. And the technology is continuously improving, and the costs are starting to come down in some areas, so I think that's helpful. But there's also a very practical, like being able to have high quality products that are going to last like 3 times longer. So the shelf life is massively extended, which then will help reduce food waste. So if I'm putting myself in your shoes, I would much rather have product that's going to last for up to 3 weeks or more versus something that's going to be just days. And so I think that there are a lot of brands and companies out there that are really focused on that aspect, which can then in turn help your operations too. But it's very interesting that we've been doing this since the birth of our company, and I think now it's very in vogue to talk about it. But our founders were very keen to this topic in the early days of Gotham Greens, and it's, I think, good that more people are talking about it, but certainly a lot more needs to be done. And the collective power of both big and small companies, established and startup, need to come together so that we can collectively move everything forward.
I'd also just add one thing from the consumer's perspective. The cost to buy, for example, Gotham Greens, it's much more expensive than...
It's on par with organic, though.
It's on par with organic.
Which is certainly more expensive, but...
It's amazing produce. It is in our refrigerator every week, but at the same time, typical consumer isn't going to spend as much as perhaps some of us in this audience would on great greens, right? And so the mindset of the consumer isn't quite there in terms of understanding the value of great produce, right? Or the value of organic food or biodynamic food. Is the consumer's mindset going to change when we're fighting against dollar menus at McDonald's and jumbo-sized Cheerios that sit on our breakfast tables in the morning? It almost seems like, especially in this country specifically, the mindset is more, and then waste. Are we on the right track with the consumer mind for this change?
Absolutely, because younger consumers are growing up in a world where they're learning about this at school, they're composting at school, they're cooking at school, they're learning, they know, they come home and they yell at their parents about what they're doing. But I also think that because, the consumer, it's a really broad base here. When I used to be doing food systems planning in low-income neighborhoods in New York City, I did some work in Cypress Hills, and I'll never forget an interview with a set of relatively recent immigrants who were schlepping to Whole Foods and schlepping to Trader Joe's and figuring out how to stretch SNAP dollars, because one woman in particular came from Peru, and she's like, all food is organic there. She's like, all produce is organic. And, she's like, I don't know what, so I feel like we look across our country, and we have a very diverse population. So I'm super optimistic that that piece is changing. And
is Meg as optimistic?
I'm optimistic, but I do think we live in this bubble here in New York and a lot of more progressive thinking. My husband's from the Midwest, and when I go there, it's not as progressive necessarily when it comes to that. I think it's everyone, I think we need to think it's not just the players who are serving the food, whether it's Gotham Greens or the Crafts of the world, the Mars of the world. Yeah, they have their place, but so does your local farmers, and that they need to be just as part of it, if not more, than what you're serving at your hotels and whatnot. So I feel like it's on everyone to educate who they deal with, and through experience and through organic and endemic experiences, and really teaching. No one in here did anything wrong. None of us were born in a time when the food system was balanced. So it's not anyone's fault here, but now that we all are educated, it is our fault if we don't do something about it.
And plus, in this room, the number of people that each of us influence through our hotels and our
Correct.
restaurants and so on and so forth, I would just gander to say is in the millions every year. This group of people can impact subtly the mindset or create that spark for millions and millions of people that we are being hospitable towards. And so perhaps there is a little bit more hope, at least from my perspective, that some of these things that we've been talking about can be resolved in the coming decades.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we have decades of time left.
No.
I do know that we have less than 2 minutes, and so I'm going to throw this last question to each of you for the audience. If they leave here today, if there's one simple thing that they can do in order to progress this cause of just being more conscious about our food, and Jodi, what would that be?
Oh, well, first of all, everyone can vote with their wallets. So you as a consumer and you as an operator have the ability to make choices. And I think it's being really knowledgeable of that. Be curious, ask questions, have the discussions, have the dialogue, and try to see it for yourself. I was mentioning that before the pandemic, we used to bring a lot of tours into our greenhouses and show people actually how their food isn't grown. And for people living in cities, it's really eye-opening, because I also grew up in the Midwest and I was across from cornfields, so I understand that. But for a lot of people, they've never seen that, and it really changes your mindset. And again, we understand that we're not the full solution, and it's really a privilege, but I think educating ourselves and the next generation is really incredibly important to having a positive change in the future.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that, or all of it, and I think it's just going back to your own operations and just doing a scan of all right, where can we improve? Where are we sourcing from? Is there local representation here? And maybe this year you add a local farm into the mix, or even just get a more sustainable product into the mix and tout that on your menu, or tout that wherever you can. And it can be baby steps, or even just from the type of packaging that you use to serve your food. Like, swap that up. There are more affordable options that are compostable now. Like, that's coming up. So I think just an audit of your current systems and reaching out to folks like us to give you some advice on ways you can make some really easy changes.
Chris?
Track your food waste every day. Every group we work with, we walk in the door and they say, we don't waste that much. We are tracking. We pay attention. Some of it ends up in inventory management, and then we actually audit it, and we find hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds in a day that they didn't even know was there. Because you're busy. These environments are so busy. People are running. And so filling out the log gets shafted sometimes. So track it so you can figure out where to reduce it. And do it at home too, just for kicks, because if we're wasting most of our food at home, every one of us can really make a difference.
Have a huge impact. And we have been permitted by Andrew, our leader, one question as we wrap this up. Does anyone have one question for this panel? Okay, I see somebody in the back there.
You have to cause trouble, don't you, Bridget?
Stirring it up. I just have a question for Christina. So you had mentioned an interesting statistic that you've seen a 14-to-1 ROI on reduction of waste and the cost to kind of do that consulting. Is that something that, thinking of actionable things that we can kind of tell our hotel clients, is that a short-term engagement for your company where you go in and you say, in 6 months, we're going to help you turn this around? Or do you like to have an ongoing relationship with your client so that you can track that sustainability over time?
So our program's really out of the box, where we go in and we put a set of our client puts a set of design and operations practices in place, and then we have ongoing tracking and ongoing service to measure impacts and to optimize over time, which is not very expensive, but it's just a guarantee that we can pay attention. Now, reducing food waste isn't like suddenly I'm separating out my food waste for compost. You can do that in a week. Reducing your food waste requires time. So definitely that would be a longer term engagement, but not necessarily a lot of time from us. It's expecting that it's a long game. It's a journey, right? That you're going to reduce a lot of food waste over a long period of time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. We'll see you soon.